Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he looked at the broken spaceship floating in the darkness. His small salvage vessel had picked up the distress signal 3 hours ago. Now he was suited up and ready to board whatever was left of the ship. The vessel was unlike anything Marcus had seen before. It was sleek and silver, with strange symbols carved into its hull. Most human ships were built for function, not beauty. This one looked like someone had tried to make art out of metal and succeeded. Marcus attached his cutting torch to the airlock. The metal was harder than normal steel, but his tools could handle it. After 20 minutes of careful work, he had created an opening big enough to squeeze through. The inside of the ship was dark and cold. Marcus turned on his helmet lights and looked around. The walls were covered with the same strange symbols he had seen outside. Everything was bigger than it should be, as if the people who built this ship were much larger than humans. Marcus made his way through the corridors carefully. His boots made soft clicking sounds on the metal floor. The ship seemed empty, but he had learned to be careful during his 5 years as a salvage worker. Empty ships sometimes had surprises waiting for their visitors. In what looked like the main control room, Marcus found his first real treasure. Banks of computers lined the walls, their screens dark but intact. More importantly, he found a storage unit filled with what looked like technical manuals. Marcus opened one of the books. The text was written in symbols he could not read, but there were pictures and diagrams that made sense to any mechanic. These were engineering manuals, showing how to build and repair complex machines. What caught his attention was that some of the newer manuals had notes written in the margins. The notes were in broken English, as if someone had been trying to translate the alien text. Words like power core and energy flow were scribbled next to the strange symbols. Marcus spent the next 2 hours copying everything he could find onto his portable data storage. The diagrams showed technology far beyond anything humans had developed. Power systems that could run for centuries, metal that could repair itself, and weapons that could cut through anything. One set of diagrams particularly interested him. It showed what looked like a suit of armor, but far more complex than anything a human soldier would wear. The armor seemed to be part machine, part living tissue. According to the diagrams, it could keep someone alive indefinitely and gave its wearer incredible strength. The notes in the margins called it Queen Armor and Life Crown. Marcus could not understand most of the technical details, but his mechanic's eye told him this was the most sophisticated piece of engineering he had ever seen. A loud clang echoed through the ship, making Marcus jump. He was not alone anymore. Heavy footsteps were moving through the corridors, getting closer to his location. Marcus quickly grabbed the most important manuals and stuffed them into his tool bag. The footsteps stopped outside the control room. Marcus held his breath and tried to make himself smaller behind one of the computer banks. Through the doorway, he could see large shadows moving in the corridor. "Human presence detected," a voice said in perfect English. The voice was deep and seemed to come from multiple throats at once. "Scan shows one life form. Non-hostile salvage operations." 3 figures entered the control room. They were twice as tall as Marcus and covered in what looked like natural armor plating. Their skin was purple-gray and they had 4 eyes arranged around their heads. Each one carried a weapon that hummed with energy. "You are trespassing on Zephyrian property, human," the leader said. Its voice was calmer now, almost bored. "This vessel belongs to the Empire." Marcus stood up slowly, his hands raised to show he was not armed. "I responded to a distress signal," he said. The ship appeared to be abandoned. "No ship of the Empire is ever truly abandoned," the leader replied. "You will come with us. The Queen will decide what to do with you." Marcus knew he had no choice. These aliens were clearly more advanced than humans, and their weapons could probably turn him into dust before he could blink. He nodded and followed them out of the ship. The alien vessel that had caught him was enormous. It could have held 50 ships the size of his salvage craft. The corridors were filled with the same purple-gray aliens, all of them stopping to stare at Marcus as he was led past. They put him in a holding cell that was clean, but obviously designed for prisoners. The walls were smooth metal with no handholds or anything that could be used as a weapon. A small window showed the stars moving past as the ship traveled through space. Marcus used the time to study the technical manuals he had managed to keep hidden in his tool bag. The more he looked at the diagrams, the more he understood about the alien technology. It was not as different from human engineering as he had first thought. The basic principles were the same. just applied in much more sophisticated ways. The armor diagrams fascinated him the most. He could see that the power systems were incredibly complex, but they all depended on a few key components. If any of those components failed, the entire system would shut down. It was elegant engineering, but it had a weakness that any good mechanic could spot. After what felt like several days, the guards came for him. They led him through corridors that became more and more decorated as they walked. The walls were covered with precious metals and stones that sparkled in the light. This was clearly an important part of the ship. The throne room was the most impressive space Marcus had ever seen. The ceiling was so high it disappeared into shadows, and the walls were made of some kind of crystal that reflected light in rainbow patterns. At the center of the room, on a throne carved from a single massive gem, sat the Queen. She was larger than the other aliens Marcus had seen, and her natural armor plating was more elaborate. But what really caught his attention was the mechanical armor she wore over her natural protection. It was exactly like the diagrams he had been studying, but something was wrong with it. The armor was sparking. Small electrical discharges danced across its surface, and Marcus could see scorch marks where components had overheated. The Queen moved stiffly, as if the armor was fighting against her instead of helping her. As Marcus watched, the sparking got worse. The Queen tried to stand, but the armor's power systems failed completely. She collapsed back onto her throne, her four eyes closing in what looked like pain. The court erupted in chaos. Aliens ran back and forth calling for doctors and engineers, but Marcus could see that none of them dared to get close to the Queen's armor. They were afraid of it, treating it like something sacred that could not be touched. Marcus understood their fear, but he also understood machines. And this machine was clearly broken in ways that could be fixed. He just needed the chance to try. Queen Vexthera opened her four eyes slowly. The pain in her chest was getting worse every day, and now her armor had failed completely in front of her entire court. She could feel the weight of 1,000 stares as her advisors whispered among themselves. "Who repaired my armor?" she roared, her voice echoing off the crystal walls of the throne room. The question was rhetorical. Everyone knew that no one had been able to repair the ancient armor for decades. The last engineer who had tried to fix it had been reduced to ash when he touched the wrong component. The court fell silent. Every Zephyrian present knew the history of the Queen's armor. It had been built by the Forerunners, a race that had disappeared from the galaxy thousands of years ago. The technology was beyond their understanding, and they treated it with the reverence and fear it deserved. But in the silence that followed the Queen's roar, a small voice spoke up. "I can fix it." Every head in the throne room turned toward the source of the voice. Standing in chains near the back of the court was the human prisoner they had brought in that morning. He was tiny compared to the Zephyrians around him, barely reaching the chest of the shortest guard. General Krexthor, the Queen's chief military advisor, hissed in anger. "The human dares to speak in the presence of the Queen without permission," he said. "It should be executed immediately for this insult." But Queen Vexithera raised one of her massive hands and the general fell silent. She studied the small creature who had spoken. Humans were known throughout the galaxy as a young race, barely able to travel between stars. What could this primitive being possibly know about Forerunner technology? "You claim you can repair the Crown of Eternity?" the Queen asked, using the formal name for her armor. "Do you understand what you are saying, human? This armor is older than your entire civilization." Marcus looked up at the enormous alien Queen. Even sitting on her throne, she towered over him. Her natural armor plating was deep purple with silver markings, and her four eyes glowed with an inner light. The mechanical armor she wore over her natural protection was clearly causing her pain. "I know it's old," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice steady. "But broken is broken no matter how old something is, and that armor is definitely broken." The court erupted in angry voices. Several advisors demanded that the human be punished for his disrespect. Others argued that he should be studied to understand how humans could be so foolishly confident. General Krexthor stepped forward, his hand on his weapon. "Your Majesty, this creature is obviously trying to deceive us. Humans are known for their lies and trickery. We should not waste time listening to its false promises." Queen Vexithera considered this. She had heard the reports about humans from her scouts. They were described as unpredictable, sometimes foolish, but also surprisingly resourceful. Their technology was primitive, but they had managed to survive and spread across several star systems, despite having no help from older races. "What makes you think you can succeed where our greatest engineers have failed?" she asked Marcus. Marcus looked at the sparking armor more carefully. Now that he was closer, he could see the problems more clearly. The power couplings were corroded, several circuits had been jury-rigged with incompatible components, and what looked like a main fuse had been burning out slowly for years. "Because I'm not afraid of it," Marcus said simply. "Your people treat this armor like it's magic, but it's not. It's just a very sophisticated machine. And machines break down when they're not maintained properly." The Queen leaned forward in her throne, ignoring the pain from her failing armor. "You have studied our technology?" Marcus nodded. "I found technical manuals on that derelict ship. Someone had been translating them into English. I spent the whole trip here reading about how this armor works." This was not entirely true. Marcus had only been able to understand the basic principles from the diagrams and notes, but his 5 years as a salvage mechanic had taught him that most complex machines were just collections of simpler machines working together. If you understood the simple parts, you could figure out the complex whole. "Even if you understand the theory," General Krexthor said, "the practice is far more dangerous. The armor contains enough energy to power a small city. One mistake could kill everyone in this room." Marcus shrugged. "Then you'd better make sure I don't make any mistakes." The casual way the human dismissed the danger stunned the entire court. Zephyrians were a careful, methodical people. They planned for every possibility and followed established procedures. The idea of approaching such a dangerous task with such confidence was almost incomprehensible to them. Queen Vexithera made her decision. She was dying slowly as her armor failed piece by piece. Her doctors estimated she had perhaps a month before the life support systems shut down completely. The Empire needed her to live, and traditional methods had failed. "You will be given one chance," she announced. "If you succeed in repairing the Crown of Eternity, you will be rewarded beyond your imagination. If you fail—" She did not need to finish the sentence. Marcus nodded. "I'll need some tools, and I'll need to examine the armor more closely." "Absolutely not," General Krexthor said. "The Crown of Eternity cannot be removed from the Queen's body. It has been bonded to her nervous system since she was crowned." Marcus frowned. This was a complication he had not expected. "Then I'll have to work on it while she's wearing it." "That's going to be more dangerous." "How much more dangerous?" the Queen asked. Marcus considered this carefully. Working on live electrical systems was always risky. But if the armor was integrated with the Queen's biology, any mistake could kill her instantly. "Well," he said finally, "if I mess up, you'll definitely know about it." Despite the seriousness of the situation, Queen Vexthera found herself almost smiling at the human's matter-of-fact attitude. When was the last time anyone in her court had spoken to her so directly? "Guards," she commanded, "bring the human his tools, and clear the throne room of all non-essential personnel." As the court began to empty, Marcus walked closer to the throne. The armor's problems were even more obvious up close. He could smell the burnt insulation and see where metal had been stressed beyond its limits. "When was the last time anyone did maintenance on this thing?" he asked. "Maintenance?" The Queen looked confused. "You know, regular checkups, replacing worn parts, cleaning out dust and debris." The Queen stared at him. The Crown of Eternity was built by the Forerunners. It was designed to last forever without maintenance. Marcus shook his head. "Nothing lasts forever without maintenance. Even the best engineering in the galaxy can't overcome basic physics. This armor has been running for how long without anyone checking on it?" "Approximately 3,000 years, Marcus whistled softly. "And it's still mostly working." "That's actually pretty impressive engineering. But even the best machines need some care." He pulled out his diagnostic tools and began scanning the armor's power systems. The readings confirmed what he had suspected. The armor was still incredibly sophisticated, but years of neglect had caused multiple small failures that were cascading into larger problems. "The good news," Marcus said as he worked, "is that most of this is fixable. The bad news is that I'm going to have to do it while the armor is still connected to your nervous system." Queen Vexithera watched the small human examine, her armor with tools that looked primitive compared to Zephyrian technology. But his movements were confident and purposeful. He seemed to understand what he was looking at. "Begin," she commanded. Marcus nodded and reached for the first burned-out component. "Just try to hold still. This might tickle a little." Marcus had been working for 3 days straight. He had asked for food and water to be brought to the throne room so he would not have to stop. The Queen had remained perfectly still during this time, watching him work with growing fascination. The human's approach to repairing the armor was unlike anything she had ever seen. Zephyrian engineers followed strict procedures passed down through generations. They would study a problem for months before attempting any repairs, and even then they would only make changes that matched exactly what the original builders had done. Marcus worked differently. He would look at a broken component, think for a few minutes, then try something completely new. When his first attempt did not work, he would try another approach without any sign of frustration. "Why did you remove that power coupling?" Queen Vexithera asked as Marcus set aside a small metal device that had been part of the armor's chest section. "Because it was fighting with the main power flow," Marcus explained while he worked on connecting a replacement part. "See, whoever designed this armor was brilliant, but they were thinking like an engineer from 3,000 years ago. They built in redundancies and backup systems, but they did not account for how the components would age." Marcus held up the damaged coupling. "This little guy was supposed to regulate power to your left arm servo, but the crystal matrix inside it has been slowly degrading. Instead of stepping down the voltage like it was supposed to, it was creating interference patterns that were messing up the entire left side of your armor." The Queen flexed her left arm experimentally. For the first time in years, the movement was smooth and painless. "How did you know to remove it?" "Because I've seen the same problem in human machinery," Marcus said. "Different technology, same basic physics. When a voltage regulator starts to fail, it creates a specific type of electrical noise. I learned to recognize that sound when I was fixing mining equipment." Marcus moved to another section of the armor. This part was more complex, with multiple layers of circuits and what looked like organic components grown rather than built. He studied it carefully before making any changes. "The manuals I found called this the life interface," he said. "It's connected directly to your nervous system, right?" Queen Vexthara nodded. "The crown of eternity does not just protect me. It enhances my physical capabilities and allows me to interface directly with Zephyrian technology. Through the armor, I can control any system in my empire." Marcus whistled softly. "That's incredible. And also incredibly complicated. No wonder your engineers were afraid to touch this thing. One wrong move and they could damage your brain. Does that frighten you?" the Queen asked. Marcus considered the question seriously. "A little," he admitted. "But fear is not useful when you're trying to fix something. The armor needs repair, and I'm the only one here who's willing to try, so I just have to be very careful and trust my training." This attitude amazed Queen Vexithera. In Zephyrian culture, fear was considered a sign of wisdom. A healthy fear of dangerous technology kept engineers alive and prevented catastrophic accidents. But the humans seemed to treat fear as simply another factor to be managed, like voltage or temperature. Marcus began working on the life interface components. These were the most delicate parts of the armor, and he moved very slowly. He explained his reasoning as he worked, partly to help himself think and partly because he could see that the Queen was genuinely interested. "The organic components are actually easier to work with than the mechanical ones," he said. "Living tissue wants to heal itself. I just need to give it the right conditions." He cleaned away years of accumulated cellular waste and adjusted the nutrient flow to the biomechanical interfaces. Almost immediately, the Queen could feel the difference. The constant low-level pain that had become part of her daily existence began to fade. "How is this possible?" she asked. "Our best medical scientists have studied these interfaces for decades without understanding how they function." Marcus smiled as he worked. "Sometimes an outside perspective helps. Your people have been thinking about this as forerunner technology that must be preserved exactly as it was built. I'm thinking about it as a living system that needs to grow and adapt. You are changing the original design." "I'm helping it change itself," Marcus corrected. "The forerunners built this armor to last forever, but they also built it to evolve. These organic components are trying to adapt to your specific biology, but they've been constrained by the mechanical parts that were failing." As Marcus continued his work, the Queen began to feel sensations she had forgotten were possible. The armor had always been heavy, requiring effort to move. Now it felt light, almost weightless. More importantly, the connection between her mind and the armor's systems was becoming clearer. "I can feel the ship," she said in amazement. "I mean, I could always interface with the ship's systems, but now, it's like the ship is part of my body." Marcus nodded. "That's how it's supposed to work. The interference from the failing components was blocking about 70% of the neural connections. You've been running on backup systems for years without realizing it. General Krexthor had been watching the repairs from a safe distance. He approached the throne carefully, his 4 eyes showing concern. "Your Majesty," he said, "are you certain this is wise? The human is making changes that cannot be undone. If something goes wrong—" "Something was already going wrong," the Queen replied. "I was dying slowly. Now I feel more alive than I have in decades." Marcus looked up from his work. "Actually, General, you might want to step back a bit. I'm about to activate the main power grid, and there might be some electrical discharge." The General moved quickly to a safer distance. Marcus made a few final adjustments, then pressed a sequence of contacts on the armor's chest plate. The entire suit hummed to life with a deep, powerful sound that had not been heard in the throne room for generations. Light flowed through the armor's circuits like liquid energy. The Queen gasped as power flowed through her body in ways she had never experienced. She stood up from her throne smoothly, without the struggle that had marked every movement for years. "By the ancestors," General Krexthor whispered, "the crown of eternity truly lives again." But Marcus was not finished. He had identified several more systems that could be improved with simple modifications. The armor was working now, but he could make it work better. "The power output is stable," he said, checking his diagnostic tools. "But I can optimize the energy distribution. And there are some subsystems that aren't being used at all. I think the Forerunner's built-in capabilities that were never activated." Queen Vexithara felt incredible. The armor that had been slowly killing her was now making her feel stronger than ever before. She looked at the small human who had accomplished what her greatest engineers had declared impossible. "What do you mean? Capabilities that were never activated?" Marcus pointed to a section of the armor near the Queen's shoulder. "There are connection points here for external systems. I think this armor was designed to control more than just ships and basic technology. It looks like it could interface with weapons, defensive systems, maybe even other suits of armor." "Other suits?" The Queen was intrigued. "The Crown of Eternity is unique. There is only one, maybe," Marcus said. "Or maybe there were supposed to be more, but they were never built." The Forerunners definitely left room for expansion. As Marcus spoke, the armor began receiving signals from across the galaxy. Systems that had been dormant for millennia were responding to the restored armor's transmissions. Deep space monitoring stations, hidden weapons platforms, and ancient Forerunner installations were all checking in with their queen. "What's happening?" Queen Vexithara asked as information flooded her consciousness. Marcus looked at his instruments in amazement. "I think you just became a lot more powerful than anyone realized." Word of the Queen's miraculous recovery spread through the Zephyrian Empire faster than light. In every corner of the 12 star systems, people heard the news that the Crown of Eternity had been restored by an alien mechanic. Some celebrated, others worried, and a few began to plan. General Krexthor stood in his private chambers, far from the throne room where the human continued to work on the Queen's armor. Around him, a group of high-ranking military officers and noble advisors spoke in hushed tones. "This is unnatural," said Admiral Yexnara, commander of the Third Fleet. "The Crown of Eternity has been failing for decades. We have learned to govern the Empire around that limitation. Now suddenly everything changes because of one primitive alien. It's worse than unnatural," added Lord Zexthol, one of the oldest nobles in the Empire. "It's dangerous. The Queen now has access to Forerunner systems that have been dormant since before our civilization began. She could become too powerful for anyone to control." General Krexthor nodded grimly. He had served the Zephyrian Empire for 40 years, rising through the ranks during the gradual decline of the Queen's power. As her armor failed, more and more decisions had fallen to the military council and the noble houses. They had become the real rulers of the Empire, with the Queen serving as a figurehead. Now that was changing. The Queen's armor was not just repaired. It was better than it had ever been. Through the Crown of Eternity, she could directly control any Zephyrian technology in the Empire. Ships, weapons, communication systems, even the life support on space stations could all be operated by her will alone. "What do we know about this human?" Admiral Yexnara asked. "His name is Marcus Chen," General Krexthor replied. "He is a salvage worker from the outer rim of human space. No military training, no political connections. He appears to be exactly what he claims to be, a simple mechanic." "Simple mechanics do not repair Forerunner technology," Lord Zexthul pointed out. There must be more to this creature than we understand. General Krexthor had been thinking the same thing. He had watched the human work for 3 days, and what he had seen troubled him deeply. Marcus Chen approached problems in ways that no Zephyrian engineer would consider. He ignored established procedures, combined incompatible technologies, and somehow made everything work better than before. I believe the human is simply applying his species' chaotic approach to engineering, the general said. Humans are known for their unpredictable methods, but that makes him even more dangerous. We cannot predict what he might do next. The Queen seems to trust him completely, Admiral Yexnara observed. She has named him Royal Engineer and given him access to the most classified technical archives in the Empire. This was true, and it worried General Krexthor more than anything else. Queen Vexithera had always been cautious about sharing advanced technology with other species. Now she was not only sharing it with a human, she was actively encouraging him to study and modify it. We must act soon, Lord Zexthul said. Every day the human remains here, the Queen becomes more dependent on his skills. Soon she may decide that she no longer needs the traditional power structure of the Empire. General Krexthor looked around the room at the assembled leaders. These were the beings who had really run the Zephyrian Empire for the past 20 years. They commanded the fleets, controlled the trade routes, and made the decisions that affected billions of lives. Now all of that was threatened by one small alien with a tool bag. What are you proposing? He asked. Remove the threat, Admiral Yexnara said simply. Both the human and the Queen. The Empire has survived for 3,000 years. It will survive this crisis as well, but only if we act decisively. The Queen is beloved by the people, General Krexthor pointed out. If we move against her openly, we risk civil war. Then we do not move openly, Lord Zexthul suggested. The Crown of Eternity may be more powerful now, but it is also more complex. Systems that complex can be sabotaged. An unfortunate accident, caused by the humans' reckless modifications. General Krexthor considered this. It was a dangerous plan, but the alternative was worse. If Queen Vexithera retained her new power, she would eventually realize that she no longer needed the noble houses or the military council. She could rule the Empire directly through the Forerunner technology that the human had unlocked. How quickly can this be arranged? He asked. The human has been working almost without rest, Admiral Yexnara said. He must sleep eventually. When he does, our technicians can access the armor's systems. Meanwhile, in the throne room, Marcus was completely unaware of the plot forming against him. He was too focused on the amazing technology he was working with. Every component he examined revealed new possibilities, new ways to improve the already incredible armor. Queen Vexithara watched him work with growing admiration. The human's enthusiasm for his craft was infectious. When was the last time she had seen anyone so excited about their work? You are enjoying this, she observed. Marcus looked up from the component he was adjusting. This is the most advanced engineering I've ever seen. Of course I'm enjoying it. Do you know what this armor could do if we unlocked all of its capabilities? Tell me. Marcus gestured to the various systems he had been studying. The Forerunners built this to be the ultimate interface between biological intelligence and technological systems. Right now you can control Zephyrian technology through it, but the armor itself is much more sophisticated than your current technology level, meaning that if we had the right equipment, this armor could probably interface with any technological system in the galaxy. Human ships, alien computers, ancient artifacts, anything that runs on recognizable physical principles. The implications were staggering. Queen Vexithara had always been powerful within her own empire, but the armor modifications Marcus was describing would make her a force to be reckoned with on a galactic scale. Would such modifications be possible? She asked. Absolutely, Marcus said. The hardest part would be building compatible interfaces, but that's just an engineering problem. Give me a year and the right resources, and I could make you the most powerful individual in known space. As Marcus spoke, neither he nor the Queen noticed the small listening device that General Krexthor had placed near the throne. Every word of their conversation was being transmitted to the conspirators gathering in the General's chambers. We cannot wait, General Krexthor said after hearing Marcus's latest revelations. If the human continues his work, the Queen will become unstoppable. When do we strike? Admiral Yexnara asked. Tonight. The human has been working for 72 hours with minimal rest. He will have to sleep soon. When he does, we move. But General Krexthor had underestimated both the human's endurance and his paranoia. Marcus had spent years working on salvage ships where a moment's inattention could mean death. He had developed habits that kept him alive in dangerous situations. One of those habits was never completely trusting his surroundings. As he worked on the Queen's armor, part of his attention was always focused on the people around him. He had noticed the way some of the court officials looked at him, and he had seen General Krexthor's increasingly hostile expressions. Marcus had also noticed things about the armor that he had not shared with anyone. The Forerunners had built multiple security systems into the Crown of Eternity, including some that could detect external threats to the wearer. As Marcus restored these systems, they began to warn him of danger. "Your Majesty," Marcus said quietly as he pretended to work on a routine adjustment, "I think we might have a problem." Queen Vexithara listened carefully as Marcus explained what he had discovered. The armor's security systems were detecting hostile intent from multiple sources within the palace. Electronic surveillance devices were monitoring their conversations, and several groups of armed personnel were moving into position around the throne room. "How long have you known about this?" she asked. "About an hour," Marcus replied, continuing to work on the armor while they spoke. "I didn't want to say anything until I was sure. But the armor's threat detection systems are very sophisticated. Someone is definitely planning to move against us." The Queen was not entirely surprised. She had ruled the Zephyrian Empire for 50 years, and she understood how power worked. When she had been weak, others had filled the vacuum. Now that she was strong again, they would see her as a threat to their own positions. "Can you identify who is involved?" she asked. Marcus nodded toward a small display he had integrated into the armor's systems. The armor can track the electronic signatures of anyone carrying Zephyrian technology. "Look at this pattern." The display showed a three-dimensional map of the palace. Dozens of small lights represented palace guards, servants, and officials going about their normal duties. But several clusters of lights were moving in coordinated patterns that suggested military planning. "General Krexthor is the center of the largest group," Marcus observed, "and there are smaller teams positioned at all the exits from this section of the palace." Queen Vexithara studied the display with growing anger. Krexthor had served her faithfully for decades, or so she had thought. The idea that he would betray her now, when she was stronger than she had been in years, seemed impossible. "Perhaps there is some other explanation," she said. "Maybe," Marcus agreed. "But the armor's systems are also detecting energy signatures consistent with explosives. Someone is planning to do more than just arrest us." As if summoned by their conversation, General Krexthor entered the throne room with a squad of heavily armed guards. His expression was grim but determined. "Your Majesty," he said formally, "I regret that this action is necessary, but for the good of the Empire, you and the human must be detained." Queen Vexithara stood slowly, feeling the power of her restored armor flow through her body. "On what charges, General?" "Treason," Krexthor replied. "You have shared classified Imperial technology with an alien species without authorization from the Council of Nobles. And you have allowed that alien to make unauthorized modifications to sacred Forerunner artifacts." "I am the Queen," Vexthara said, her voice carrying the authority of 3,000 years of Imperial rule. "I do not require authorization from anyone." "That," General Krexthor said, raising his weapon, "is precisely the problem." The throne room erupted into chaos as the general's guards opened fire. But their weapons, designed to penetrate standard Zephyrian armor, were useless against the Crown of Eternity. The energy blasts that should have killed the Queen instantly were absorbed and redirected by the armor's defensive systems. Marcus had been expecting this moment. During his work on the armor, he had quietly installed several modifications that went far beyond simple repairs. The Crown of Eternity now had capabilities that even the Forerunners had not originally included. "Your Majesty," Marcus said calmly, as weapons fire filled the air around them, "would you like me to demonstrate the new defensive features?" Queen Vexthara smiled grimly. "Proceed." Marcus activated a sequence of controls that he had built into the armor's chest plate. Immediately, every piece of Zephyrian technology in the throne room came under the Queen's direct control. The guards' weapons stopped firing as their targeting systems were overridden. Their communications devices began broadcasting the Queen's voice instead of military commands. But Marcus was just getting started. Through the armor's enhanced interface systems, Queen Vexithara could now access the palace's entire network. Security cameras throughout the building showed her the positions of all the conspirators. She could see Admiral Yexnara in the command center, trying desperately to regain control of the palace's defense systems. She could see Lord Zexthal in the communications room, attempting to send messages to allies in other star systems. Interesting, the Queen said as she explored her new capabilities. I can see everything, control everything. The entire palace is now an extension of my will. General Krexthor watched in horror as his carefully planned coup fell apart around him. His communications were compromised, his weapons were useless, and his allies were trapped in rooms that had suddenly become prison cells. This is impossible, he said. No single being should have this much power. You're right, Marcus agreed, which is why I built in some safeguards. The human gestured to another display that showed the armor's power distribution. Despite all of its incredible capabilities, the Crown of Eternity was still fundamentally dependent on the Queen's biological systems. If she ever tried to use its power in ways that would harm innocent people, the armor would simply shut down. The Forerunners were smart, Marcus explained. They built this technology to enhance a worthy ruler, not to create a tyrant. The armor will only work for someone who genuinely cares about the welfare of their people. Queen Vexithara felt the truth of this as she explored the armor's systems. She could feel the ethical constraints built into every component. The power was incredible, but it came with equally incredible responsibility. What happens now? General Krexthor asked, his weapon lowered in defeat. Queen Vexithara considered this carefully. The traditional punishment for treason was death, but she found herself reluctant to order executions. The armor's influence on her thinking was subtle but noticeable. It encouraged mercy and wisdom over anger and revenge. You will be exiled, she decided. All of you. Leave the Empire and do not return. That is more mercy than you deserve. But it is what justice requires. As the failed conspirators were led away, Queen Vexithara turned to Marcus. The small human had not only saved her life, he had transformed her into something greater than she had ever been before. What do you want as your reward? She asked. Wealth? A position of power? Your own star system to rule? Marcus thought about this seriously. Actually, I'd like to keep working on this armor. And maybe we could start a project to train other engineers, both human and Zephyrian, in Forerunner technology. You want to share this knowledge? Knowledge that's hoarded eventually gets lost, Marcus said. But knowledge that's shared grows stronger. If we're going to explore the galaxy and find more Forerunner artifacts, we're going to need a lot of qualified people to work on them. Queen Vexithara smiled. This was exactly the kind of thinking that the armor encouraged. Instead of hoarding power, Marcus wanted to use it to benefit everyone. Very well, she said. I hereby establish the Human Zephyrian Engineering Corps, with you as its first director. Our mission will be to study and preserve Forerunner technology for the benefit of all species. Marcus grinned. I like the sound of that. When do we start? Immediately. The armor has already detected several Forerunner installations in nearby star systems. Some of them have been sending signals since we restored the Crown of Eternity. As Queen Vexithara spoke, star maps appeared in the air around them, showing the locations of ancient artifacts scattered across the galaxy. Each one represented knowledge and technology that could benefit entire civilizations. How many installations are there? Marcus asked in amazement. Hundreds, the Queen replied. Perhaps thousands. The Forerunners built a vast network of research stations, defense platforms, and knowledge repositories. Most of them have been dormant for millennia, waiting for someone with the proper authorization to reactivate them. Marcus looked at the star map with the eyes of an engineer. Each point of light represented problems to solve, mysteries to unravel, and technologies to master. It was the greatest salvage operation in galactic history. Well, he said, pulling out his tools, we'd better get started. This armor is working perfectly now, but if we're going to be exploring ancient installations, we might want to add some additional features. Queen Vexithara laughed, a sound that had not been heard in the throne room for decades. What kind of additional features? Marcus pointed to a distant star on the map. How about we start with faster-than-light communication? If we're going to build a galactic engineering corps, we're going to need to stay in touch across impossible distances. Is such a thing possible? With Forerunner technology? I'm betting we can figure it out. Marcus smiled as he began planning his next impossible project. After all, we've already proved that there's no such thing as unfixable. As they worked together to plan their next adventure, neither the Queen nor Marcus noticed that their conversation was being recorded by Forerunner monitoring systems across the galaxy. Ancient artificial intelligences that had slept for millennia were awakening, responding to the restoration of the crown of eternity. The galaxy was about to become a much more interesting place.